The hum of the engines was a gentle lull, the kind that made most passengers settle into the monotony of another domestic flight. Avery Collins, however, didn't feel lullaby comfort. At 15, traveling alone, she sat in seat 7A, staring at the overhead panel with keen interest. Her hoodie was pulled up, framing a face too young to attract much attention, glasses slipping slightly down the bridge of her nose. In her lap rested a well-worn notebook, its edges frayed, pages filled with sketches of aircraft, everything from the Wright Flyer to the F-22 Raptors she had memorized by heart. Every line of every drawing bore tiny annotations: wing load, thrust ratios, glide speeds. She had studied them all. She knew them all. Across the aisle, a group of teenagers whispered, snickering behind hands and earbuds. One nudged the other. "Look at 7A," he muttered. "Bet she doesn't even know how to buckle a seatbelt." The words were quiet, but Avery heard them anyway. A corner of her mouth twitched, not with anger but with calculation. She said nothing. She didn't need to. She had long ago learned that silence could be more powerful than confrontation. She adjusted her headphones and tapped her fingers lightly against the notebook's cover, as though counting beats in a rhythm only she could hear. The plane taxied along the runway, the city lights shrinking behind them as the flight attendants delivered their pre-flight announcements. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking." Avery didn't need to hear the rest. She had memorized every part of a safety briefing during countless simulator sessions with her grandfather, a retired Air Force instructor who had taught her that preparation meant survival. Turbulence hit suddenly, a violent shudder that made cups topple and passengers gasp. The group of teenagers laughed nervously, glancing at Avery. "See, nervous Nellie," one shouted, pointing at her. They laughed again, expecting her to flinch or whimper. She didn't. Her fingers traced an invisible line along the armrest, counting the vibrations, calculating their force. In her mind, she ran the equations she'd practiced in simulations: angle of attack, lift-to-drag ratio, descent rate. It was all instinct, all muscle memory. She wasn't scared, not yet. The captain's voice suddenly crackled over the PA, strained and uneven. Folks, we're experiencing minor turbulence. Please remain seated." Another jolt rocked the plane, stronger this time. Drinks sloshed over the trays, metal clattered. Panic fluttered through the cabin like a living thing. Avery's attention snapped from the instruments above her to the cockpit door. Something felt off, too off. She leaned forward slightly, trying to catch a glimpse of the pilots' faces through the small window. Her heart didn't race, not yet, but a cold awareness settled over her. Something wasn't just turbulence. She had flown thousands of simulator scenarios where the plane responded unpredictably. This felt like one of them, but worse. A flicker of lights above her seat sent her hand snapping to her notebook. She flipped it open, revealing annotated emergency checklists, diagrams of engine failures and glide tables. The passengers around her continued to chatter nervously. An elderly woman clutched a prayer book. A businessman tapped his phone incessantly. Avery didn't move. Instead, she whispered to herself, reciting emergency procedures, calculating glide ratios, engine restart sequences, even before she knew if they were needed. Her lips barely moved. She repeated the same mantra she had learned from her grandfather: plan, calculate, execute, survive. A sudden shudder ran through the fuselage. The teenagers who had mocked her fell silent, gripping their armrests. The plane tilted slightly, a shiver running through its metal skin. Avery's eyes flicked to the overhead display. Altitude dropping faster than expected. Airspeed fluctuating. Fuel levels nominal, but for how long? She adjusted her hoodie, took a deep breath, and slid her notebook onto her lap, fingers resting over her pen. Then it happened. A faint, almost imperceptible stutter from the left engine. The sound was mechanical, unnatural, a cough, a wheeze, a warning. Passengers didn't notice, too busy gripping armrests or whispering reassurances to children. Avery did. She leaned closer, her hand moving instinctively to the side panel of the seat in front of her, tapping a rhythm she had practiced 100 times in simulations. Her mind raced through options: engine restart, glide approach, manual override. The captain's voice broke through again, this time sharper, more anxious. Passengers, please remain calm. We are, It cut off abruptly. Avery's head snapped toward the cockpit. Her instincts screamed that this wasn't normal. She wasn't just observing anymore, she was preparing. She slid her headphones off and tucked them into her backpack. Her fingers hovered over the notebook, ready to translate theory into action. The teenagers leaned toward her now, curiosity overtaking mockery. One whispered, "Hey, do you actually know what you're doing?" Avery didn't answer. Instead, she turned her gaze forward, staring at the cockpit, noticing the tension in the pilot's shoulders through the small window. Something big was about to happen. She could feel it. Her heartbeat, calm until now, picked up slightly, not fear but anticipation. Another tremor shook the plane. Drinks spilled. The elderly woman shrieked. A child began to cry. Avery's lips moved silently as she ran numbers in her head. Descent rate, glide ratio, distance to the nearest possible emergency field. Every second counted. Then the cockpit door rattled. Both pilots glanced toward it, their eyes wide. Avery, quiet until now, finally spoke. Her voice was low but confident. "You'll need the ram air turbine if the engines fail. Deploy it manually. If you don't, we won't have control." The words were barely audible but precise, like the punch of a hammer. Passengers leaned closer, confused. The teenagers exchanged uncertain glances. Who was this quiet kid in 7A? And why did the pilots suddenly stop what they were doing to glance at the door, their faces a mixture of disbelief and hope? Avery didn't flinch. She knew the simulations, she knew the sequences, she knew the stakes. And suddenly, without warning, the plane shuddered violently again, a deep, bone-rattling tremor that made the entire cabin lurch. The lights flickered, casting the interior in a strobe of white and shadow. Passengers screamed. Drinks flew. The plane dipped hard to the left, throwing people against their seats. Avery gritted her teeth, clutching the armrest, feeling the vibrations run through her body like a pulse of warning. She calculated everything: weight, balance, trajectory. The window in front of her framed the city lights, streaking past as though the plane were falling straight into them. And then she saw it. The first engine had stopped completely. The second engine coughed in protest. The cabin filled with an eerie silence that was louder than any scream. Every passenger froze. Fear hit them all at once, thick and heavy, like smoke. Avery inhaled deeply, her mind already moving through the sequences she had drilled countless times. Her hand went to the notebook. She flipped to the page marked in red, "Dual Engine Failure Emergency Procedures." She muttered under her breath, "Time to fly." Passengers glanced at her now, noticing the calm in her expression amidst the chaos. The teenagers who had laughed earlier froze, realization dawning in their eyes. The quiet girl in 7A, she wasn't just a passenger. She was something else entirely. And as the plane pitched slightly, heading down toward the dark horizon, Avery's eyes locked on the cockpit door. The unthinkable was about to begin. Because what nobody yet knew was that the fate of all 150 passengers would soon rest in the hands of the quiet kid in seat 7A. And outside, high above, a faint, distant roar hinted at a presence in the sky that nobody could yet see, but would soon. The cabin had descended into chaos. Screams filled the air as passengers clutched at seatbelts, armrests, anything solid enough to give them the illusion of safety. Oxygen masks dangled uselessly, swinging with the violent shudders of the aircraft. Avery Collins had removed her headphones entirely, eyes scanning the overhead gauges with precision. The first engine was completely dead. The second coughed once, twice, and then fell silent. Passengers hadn't noticed the subtle signs of failure until the silence hit. No hum, no vibration, nothing but the eerie whistle of air rushing past the fuselage. Avery's fingers traced the notebook in her lap. Every training simulation she had ever run in her grandfather's basement flashed through her mind. Emergency glide tables, alternate engine procedures, manual hydraulic overrides. They weren't theory anymore. They were about to be reality. "Flight attendants, brace yourselves," a voice screamed. Not a professional announcement, a passenger. Panic had begun to spread like wildfire. One man, a businessman in a navy suit, grabbed his briefcase like it was a life raft. Children cried. Elderly passengers muttered prayers. Avery sat rigid, observing, calculating, noting every weight shift, every sudden lurch, every rise and fall of the fuselage. She leaned slightly forward. The cockpit door was sealed. Both pilots were inside, hands on the yokes, eyes wide. Avery knew instinctively that they were trying every known procedure to restart the engines. She didn't need to be told. They had only seconds to stabilize the plane before altitude and gravity began to strip away every option. Then the first sharp boom rocked the plane. Metal shrieked. Overhead compartments rattled, spilling contents. A woman's handbag clattered to the floor. Avery's gaze snapped to the window where a streak of silver light tore across the night sky. A fighter jet. Or was it two? Her pulse quickened, not with fear but recognition. She had memorized the specifications of the F-22 Raptor. That sleek, predatory silhouette in the night was unmistakable. A moment later, another violent shudder. The plane had begun to drop more rapidly. The altitude display plummeted. The passengers screamed louder. Avery gritted her teeth, murmuring the same mantra she always repeated in emergencies. Plan, calculate, execute, survive. The first flight attendant appeared near her row, wide-eyed, trembling. "Honey, please, you can't, don't." Avery's voice cut through the panic, sharp and commanding, almost unnatural for a 15-year-old. "I can help, step back." The woman froze. Avery wasn't begging. She was confident, precise, deadly calm. She opened her backpack and pulled out the laminated Civil Air Patrol card she always carried. "Cadet Captain Avery Collins," she said, voice steady. "Call sign Pixie. I know emergency procedures." For a split second, disbelief blanketed the attendant's face. Then the plane jolted again. Passengers collided with their seats. One teenager from across the aisle who had mocked her earlier shouted, "Wait, she's serious." Avery didn't answer. She rose from her seat, knees slightly bent to absorb the tremors. Every motion was calculated, deliberate. She approached the cockpit door. Inside, the captain's voice finally cut through the PA, strained with panic. "We've lost both engines. We have a dual-engine failure. Brace for impact." The words were a hammer against the cabin walls. Avery felt the weight of them but didn't flinch. Her mind raced. The plane's glide ratio, airspeed, altitude, all calculations she had memorized ran like equations in her head. There was a clearing ahead, barely visible in the dark night, but large enough, maybe, to attempt a controlled landing. Maybe. The plane tilted sharply and screams surged again. Avery pressed her hand to the cockpit door. "Open it," she said firmly. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had trained for decades, not 15 years. The pilots froze. "You're a kid," one of them muttered, disbelief cracking the edges of his voice. "I'm a cadet captain. I know what to do," Avery replied. "You need to deploy the ram air turbine manually. Now." The cockpit window rattled violently as another boom shook the fuselage. Sparks flew from an overhead panel. The co-pilot's hand hovered over the switch, uncertain. Avery didn't wait. She pulled at it, tugging with all her strength. A small lever clicked and a whine of hydraulic power filled the cabin. The yoke stabilized slightly. The plane shuddered, but control had returned. Barely. Outside, the streaks of light grew closer. Jets, agile and lethal, banked in perfect formation, sending telemetry through the air. Avery grabbed the microphone. Her voice, calm yet commanding, cut through the static. "This is Pixie. Yes, we require assistance. Provide wind data on the ridge ahead fast." Static, then, "Pixie, as in the Pixie, you're on your own again." The voice was incredulous, but Avery ignored the awe. "Coordinates now, we don't have time." Another violent drop of the fuselage sent passengers tumbling forward, some smashing into the seats ahead. Oxygen masks dangled uselessly. Avery's calm was infectious to a few nearby. She barked instructions. "Buckle in tight, keep knees up, brace." A mother clutched her toddler, sobbing. Avery crouched beside them, whispering numbers under her breath, calculating descent angles and glide vectors. The plane's metal groaned, instruments flickered. Altitude continued its merciless drop. The first landing attempt might be their last. Every second counted. Avery calculated distance to the clearing, factoring in speed, angle, turbulence, and mass distribution. Then she glanced at the cockpit door. Both pilots were watching her. Recognition, disbelief, and a flicker of hope shone in their eyes. And just like that, the first of the F-22s broke formation overhead, banking sharply. The roar was deafening, yet precise, surgical, almost ceremonial. Avery's stomach tightened. These weren't just escort jets. They were here for observation, support, backup, and maybe, just maybe, an emergency handoff if the unthinkable happened. Passengers craned their necks to see the Raptor slicing through clouds. The teenagers across the aisle who had laughed at her earlier now stared in stunned silence. Some mouthed words she couldn't hear. Avery ignored them, focusing on the gauges, the descent rate, the wind speed, the impossible odds stacked against them. And then the plane jolted violently again, hard enough to throw several passengers from their seats. Avery's hands shot to the yoke beside the captain, helping stabilize the aircraft. The first of the jets dipped in formation, transmitting crucial data in seconds. Avery absorbed it instantly. Wind shift, turbulence pockets, precise glide correction. She didn't have time to be scared. She didn't have time to think about being just a 15-year-old kid. All that mattered was keeping this plane, these lives, in the air. The cockpit door rattled again as Avery leaned in, pointing at instruments. Flaps extend incrementally, rudder manual override, glide ratio, adjust by 5 degrees left. The captain's hands moved, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence as Avery's calculations proved accurate. Outside, the night sky stretched like a dark canvas, punctuated by distant city lights, mountains looming ahead, and the silver streaks of the Raptors slicing toward them like hunters tracking a prey. The plane continued its precarious descent. Every passenger felt it. Every heart raced. The tension was tangible, electric. And as the plane began its most dangerous dive yet, the most critical moments of the flight were about to begin. Avery's voice echoed in the cockpit and over the cabin, calm, precise, commanding, but filled with the weight of one question. Would a 15-year-old kid be able to guide a crippled airliner to safety while the fastest jets in the world waited above, ready to intervene or witness disaster? The plane shuddered violently, almost tipping onto its side. Passengers screamed, clutching at seats, screaming prayers, or just staring blankly at the darkened windows. Every muscle in Avery Collins's body was alert, her fingers brushing against the notebook on her lap. But she didn't hesitate. She had memorized simulations for exactly this scenario. The dual-engine failure wasn't theory anymore. It was reality, and every second counted. A faint metallic knock reverberated from the cockpit door. The captain froze mid-command, co-pilot's eyes widening. The sound was soft but insistent. Avery's gaze sharpened. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Open it," she said, calm, commanding, with the precision of someone far beyond her 15 years. The cockpit window rattled violently. The pilots exchanged a glance. This wasn't just any passenger. The laminated card in Avery's hand, the Civil Air Patrol badge, glinted under the overhead lights. Call sign, Pixie. Recognition flashed across the captain's face. You know what you're doing," the co-pilot stammered. "I know the sequences. I know what to do if both engines fail," Avery said. Her voice carried certainty like the calm in a storm. "Let me help. Deploy the ram air turbine manually. You won't have control without it." The captain hesitated, then glanced at the co-pilot. They were seconds from panic, seconds from disaster. Finally, he nodded. The cockpit door unlocked. Avery slipped inside. The interior smelled of heated metal and fear. Both pilots were pale, faces slick with sweat. The yokes trembled slightly in their hands. Avery's eyes scanned the instruments instantly. Airspeed dropping rapidly, altitude disappearing fast, instruments flickering. She pulled a small flashlight from her hoodie pocket and shone it across the panels, illuminating hydraulic lines, switches, and indicators. "Flaps?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "Fully extended," the co-pilot replied, voice tight. "Manual override engaged?" Avery asked, moving toward the center console. "Yes," the captain said, his voice broke under tension, "but it's barely responding." Avery's hands moved with purpose. She tugged at levers, toggled switches, verified hydraulics. A low whine of restored power hummed as the ram air turbine deployed. The plane stabilized slightly. Sparks flew from an overhead panel, but the aircraft regained some control. The yokes didn't jerk as violently. A small, tenuous victory, but a victory nonetheless. Outside, the night sky stretched like a void, dotted with faint city lights below. And then a second metallic roar split the darkness. F-22 Raptors cutting through clouds, banking in formation, their engines screaming like predators. Avery's pulse quickened, not with fear but anticipation. She recognized them instantly. These weren't just escort jets. They were elite, lethal, precise, and now they were watching. The cockpit radio crackled. A sharp voice cut through static. "Airliner, this is Raptor Lead. Do you require assistance?" Avery grabbed the mic before the captain could respond. "Pixie here. Yes, we need wind data for the ridge ahead immediately." Static, then incredulous laughter. "Pixie, as in The Pixie." Her calm didn't waver. "Coordinates now. We don't have time for disbelief." The F-22s adjusted their formation, sending telemetry back instantly. Avery absorbed the data as if it were a lifeline. Wind currents, turbulence pockets, glide corrections. Every calculation, every angle, every vector was processed in a heartbeat. The plane's descent rate slowed slightly. She barked precise commands at the captain. "Angle 5 degrees left. Maintain glide speed. Nose slightly up. Flaps incrementally. Rudder manual override. Steady." The captain's hands moved, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. Avery's calm authority guided him. Outside, passengers were thrown against seats with every adjustment. A woman screamed as a tray of drinks toppled. Children cried, but Avery focused solely on survival. Then another jolt. The fuselage tilted sharply toward the mountains in the distance. Sparks flew from exposed panels. The left wing scraped the cabin lights, sending a metallic screech echoing through the cabin. Avery's pulse quickened, but her voice was unwavering. "Trust the data. Follow my instructions. We will make it." The passengers' panic intensified. The teenagers across the aisle who had mocked her laughed nervously, now paralyzed with fear. They were beginning to understand. This quiet girl, the one who had been ignored, was now the only person who could keep them alive. The Raptor pilots adjusted their flight, sending telemetry again. Avery absorbed it instantly. Wind currents shifted unpredictably. A sudden downdraft threatened to pitch the plane. She barked. "Left rudder 10 degrees, trim ailerons, nose up by 3 degrees. The co-pilot responded instantly, the plane shuddering but obeying. "God," muttered a businessman across the aisle. She's controlling it." Avery didn't answer. She didn't have time for acknowledgement. Outside, the mountains loomed closer. The clearing she had identified in simulations, the potential landing site, was just ahead, but barely. Trees swayed violently below, cliffs jutted up like knives. One wrong move and the plane would be shredded before impact. The cockpit rattled again. The pilots were sweating, glancing at each other with disbelief. You've done this before?" the captain asked, voice trembling. Avery's lips pressed into a thin line. "Simulators," she admitted. "Years of them, now it's real." The F-22s roared overhead. One adjusted its position, sending more telemetry and visual guidance. Avery integrated the data instantly, recalculating glide path, descent angle, and speed. The plane shuddered violently as they hit a pocket of turbulence. Avery's knuckles whitened as she gripped the yoke. Another passenger screamed. Avery's voice rang out, calm and commanding. "Brace positions. Keep seats forward, focus on survival. She moved to a panel beside the co-pilot, her fingers flying over switches, engaging systems manually. Sparks leapt from exposed wiring. A low metallic screech echoed through the fuselage. But control was returning. Slowly, tentatively, every adjustment, every calculation was bringing them closer to a chance at survival. Avery glanced at the pilots. Their disbelief was turning to trust. The captain nodded once, a silent acknowledgement that the girl in 7A, the one they had all dismissed as a passenger, was now their guide. Then came the first sign of hope, a faint glow from the clearing below. Trees gave way to grass, uneven but visible. The mountains still loomed, but there was a ribbon of possibility. Avery's mind raced. Time was nearly up. She barked instructions again. Flaps full, rudder precise, nose up slightly, glide ratio, adjust. Every command was executed with military precision. Outside, the F-22s flanked them, telemetry still flowing. And in that moment, every passenger realized something impossible. A 15-year-old kid in seat 7A was guiding a crippled airliner through deadly turbulence, without engines, under the watch of the fastest jets in the world. But the most dangerous part was still ahead. The clearing, the mountains, the limited altitude. It would take one impossible maneuver to survive. Avery's eyes narrowed. She knew the risk. She knew the odds. And she also knew that failing wasn't an option, not for her, not for the 150 souls depending on her. The cockpit was alive with tension. Sparks from the overhead panel sizzled, flickering across the faces of the pilots and Avery Collins. The yokes shuddered in their hands. The altitude continued to drop at a terrifying rate, the city lights disappearing beneath a blanket of darkness. Avery's pulse was steady. Her mind raced. Every instrument, every gauge, every flicker of warning light became data to process, to calculate, to act upon. Flaps, Avery asked, already knowing the answer. Fully extended, but manual override is barely responding, the co-pilot replied, sweat streaking his pale face. Avery didn't hesitate. She moved forward, fingers brushing against the switches and levers, adjusting hydraulics, checking rudders, toggling manual controls. The plane groaned and shuddered but responded. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, control returned. She exhaled silently, noting every adjustment, every nuance of the aircraft's behavior. Outside, the streaks of light returned, the silver silhouettes of the F-22 Raptors banking and slicing through the night sky. Avery's pulse quickened, not with fear but with anticipation. These were elite jets, trained for precision and rapid engagement, and they were monitoring her every move. Telemetry data streamed into the cockpit from their instruments, transmitted through the static of the radio. Avery absorbed it instantly. Wind vectors, turbulence pockets, glide angle corrections. Every second was critical. "Raptor lead," she said, taking the microphone. Her voice was calm, clear, precise. "Pixie here. I need wind data for the ridge ahead now." The voice on the other end crackled with static, then disbelief. "Pixie, as in The Pixie." Avery didn't flinch. "Coordinates now, time is critical." The telemetry arrived immediately. Avery's mind calculated instantly. Descent rate, glide path, wind shifts, weight distribution. The plane, though crippled, began to respond. Instruments stabilized just enough to provide a narrow window of hope. The captain's hands moved, initially hesitant, then with growing confidence, following her directions. The co-pilot glanced at Avery, astonished, and whispered, "She knows exactly what she's doing." "Yes," Avery replied, never taking her eyes from the instruments. "Now we glide smoothly, precisely. One wrong move and we don't make it." The passengers, meanwhile, had noticed the subtle change. The plane's violent lurches lessened slightly. Screams turned into murmurs. The teenagers who had mocked her earlier sat frozen, eyes wide. The quiet girl in 7A, the one they had dismissed, was now their lifeline. Avery's hands flew over switches, levers, panels. Sparks leapt from exposed wires, but she didn't flinch. Each movement, each command was deliberate, calculated. She adjusted the rudder, recalibrated the glide ratio, instructed minor yoke adjustments to correct a dangerous roll. The plane stabilized just enough. But the mountains loomed closer, a jagged wall of rock, trees, and earth. One mistake, one miscalculation, and the plane would be shredded before it could reach the clearing. The Raptor pilots hovered overhead, watching, analyzing, ready to assist but bound by the physics of the situation. Avery glanced at the mic again. Telemetry confirms glide path is viable. Ridge ahead, adjusted by 3 degrees left. Maintain current descent rate. Passengers brace. The co-pilot repeated her commands, his voice barely above a whisper, but the plane followed, slowly, methodically, miraculously. The clearing in the distance appeared larger in the windshield but still dangerously narrow. Sparks flew again from exposed wiring. A panel screeched under pressure. The fuselage groaned as it sliced through turbulence. "Steady," Avery muttered under her breath, though her pulse was racing. Her fingers tightened on the yoke. She felt every vibration, every tremor, every quiver of the plane's metal skin. It was alive, breathing, fighting gravity with her guidance. Outside, one of the F-22s banked sharply, sending a stream of visual telemetry. Avery's eyes tracked it instantly. Calculations ran in milliseconds. Wind speed, angle of descent, glide ratio. Adjust right rudder 2 degrees. Nose up slightly 3 degrees. Flaps maintain current extension. Brace positions. A distant boom rattled the fuselage. The passengers screamed again, thrown against seats. A woman's shoe flew across the cabin. A child cried in terror. Avery crouched slightly beside them, whispering reassurances while silently calculating the final approach. Every action, every breath, every movement mattered. There was no room for error. Then, amidst the chaos, the captain's voice broke through the panic. "Pixie, how are you? How are you managing this?" Avery's lips pressed into a thin line. "Simulations, years of training, focus, trust the data." She glanced at the co-pilot. "Do exactly as I say. We have one shot. One. If we fail, no one survives." The plane tilted slightly as a downdraft hit. Sparks flew. Panels rattled. The engines remained silent, useless. The glide was all they had. Avery's fingers moved with precision over the yoke, adjusting minutely, guiding the plane like a dancer moving across a stage. Outside, the F-22s roared. Their telemetry updated continuously. One banked sharply, sending wind corrections. Avery absorbed it instantly. "Delta correction 2 degrees left. Adjust altitude slightly. Glide path verified." The passengers began to sense the change. The plane's violent lurches lessened. Sobs became whispers, fear mixed with hope. The teenagers across the aisle stared in awe. The quiet girl, the one they had mocked and laughed at, had become their hero. Avery's mind raced ahead. The clearing, the narrow ribbon of grass and earth that could be their salvation, was almost in reach. She barked final instructions to the pilots: flaps full, rudder precise, nose up slightly, glide ratio confirmed, prepare for touchdown. The plane responded, slowly, carefully, miraculously. The instruments steadied. Sparks flickered one last time before dying down. Control, precarious, tenuous, miraculous, was theirs. Then a faint voice crackled over the radio, off-filled. "Pixie, we've been following your career. That landing, it's going to be legendary." Avery ignored the praise. There was no time for celebration. The clearing loomed closer. The mountains, still jagged and menacing, framed the narrow path. Trees brushed dangerously close. One wrong adjustment and everything would be lost. She swallowed hard, feeling every muscle in her body tense. Her hands were steady. Her mind calculated. Her heart, surprisingly calm, prepared for the impossible maneuver. The first glimmer of hope, the first real sense that survival might be possible, was within reach. But it came with a catch, a single, impossibly narrow margin for error. The mountains loomed like jagged teeth, dark and unforgiving, as the crippled airliner sliced through turbulent air. Sparks still flickered from exposed panels, warning lights blinked incessantly, and the fuselage groaned with every gust. Avery Collins's hands gripped the yoke like an extension of herself, fingers trembling only slightly, her eyes locked on the instruments and the narrow ribbon of clearing below. This was no longer a simulation. This was life and death, and every passenger's life now rested in her hands. Pixie, telemetry confirms turbulence increasing. Brace for sharp downdraft. The Raptor lead's voice crackled through static. Avery's pulse spiked, adrenaline surging. She scanned the instruments, processing speed, altitude, glide angle. Every equation she had memorized, every scenario she had simulated, now became a calculation in real time. Adjust rudder 5 degrees left. Maintain current glide slope. Flap stable, she called, calm but commanding. The co-pilot glanced at her, disbelief written across his face. This is impossible, he muttered. No, Avery said, voice unwavering. We're doing it, we have to. The passengers were screaming, thrown violently against their seats with every turbulent spike. A mother clutched her child, sobbing uncontrollably. Teenagers who had mocked her in 7A earlier were now white-faced, gripping armrests in fear and awe. One whispered, she's controlling it. Avery didn't reply. There was no room for distraction. Outside, the F-22 Raptors banked sharply, streaking alongside them, sending telemetry and wind data. One fighter swooped low, the afterburners illuminating the night sky in brief, fierce glows. Avery absorbed it instantly. Every vector, every wind shift, every microsecond of data was integrated into her calculations. The plane shuddered violently as it hit a pocket of turbulence, the descent rate spiking. Avery barked orders: left rudder 10 degrees, nose up 3, flaps hold, brace positions. The co-pilot responded, hands moving frantically, following her commands. The aircraft obeyed miraculously. The clearing ahead was still narrow. Trees lined the edges, a river of earth cutting through the valley like a warning. One miscalculation could send them spiraling into jagged rock. Avery's eyes flicked to the instruments, then outside back to the gauges. She adjusted the yoke, small, precise movements, barely perceptible. The plane tilted, corrected, tilting again, but responding. Sparks flew from a damaged panel above the cockpit. A low metallic groan ran through the fuselage. Avery ignored it, focusing entirely on the glide path. Delta correction, 3 degrees right. Glide slope confirmed. Prepare for micro-adjustments on touchdown. The captain muttered under his breath, disbelief and fear mixing. She's keeping us alive. Avery swallowed, tension coiling through her stomach. Every movement mattered. A fraction too far left, a fraction too steep, and it was over. She scanned the horizon. The clearing was approaching, impossibly tight but still just within reach. Another violent gust tossed the plane sideways. Passengers screamed, some crying, others frozen with terror. Avery leaned slightly, adjusting the yoke, recalculating glide path in milliseconds. Her fingers flew over switches, stabilizing the aircraft's minimal hydraulics. The ram air turbine whined, maintaining enough control for precision maneuvering. Delta adjustment incremental, glide slope, maintain. Avery's voice rang out clear and steady, cutting through panic. The co-pilot mirrored her movements, finally trusting her judgment completely. The plane leveled slightly, a tenuous control returning. Outside, the F-22s flanked them. One banked low, scanning the terrain, sending updated wind vectors. Avery integrated the data instantly. Minor microcorrections only. We will fit this clearing. Focus. The clearing's edges blurred as the plane descended. Trees loomed dangerously close, roots threatening to shred wings. Avery's knuckles whitened. Every calculation had to be perfect. A single misjudgment, a gust, a tilt, a misaligned rudder would end everything. Brace positions, head down, knees in, Avery commanded. Passengers complied, some muttering prayers, some holding hands, terrified yet desperate. She crouched slightly, whispering to herself the calculations she'd run hundreds of times in simulations. Speed, angle, wind, glide ratio, timing, timing, timing. The plane skidded slightly as it hit uneven airflow. Sparks erupted from the fuselage. The left wing scraped the clearing's edge. Trees exploded outward like splinters. Avery adjusted instantly, her mind calculating the trajectory to avoid the right bank tipping them into the rocks. Every movement was instinct and logic combined. A low roar of the F-22's engines cut through the night. One of the jets flashed beside the airliner, providing telemetry, a silver shadow guiding them. Avery processed the stream of data and barked final instructions. Flaps full, rudder microadjust, nose up slightly, hold, glide slope confirmed. The clearing stretched ahead, still narrow but now reachable. Avery's hands were steady, heart racing. The plane descended into the final stretch, turbulence battling every adjustment. Outside, jagged rocks and trees threatened from all sides. Sparks flew as the fuselage scraped branches, metal screeching in protest. Passengers screamed again, but Avery didn't flinch. Every microadjustment counted. Slowly, the plane stabilized, skirted the edges of the clearing, and touched down, skidding violently, tires screaming on uneven ground. Sparks erupted from wheels hitting rocks. Mud exploded around the fuselage. Trees grazed the wings. The co-pilot's voice broke. By God, she did it. Avery's fingers were white around the yoke. The plane shuddered to a near stop, tilting slightly on the uneven clearing but alive. Her eyes scanned the instruments, still minimal control but enough. Outside, the F-22s hovered, their pilots staring in disbelief. The passengers, shaken and breathless, slowly realized they were alive. The mother clutched her child, sobbing. The teenagers across the aisle stared at Avery in awe. The woman who had mocked her earlier whispered, How did she?" Avery didn't answer. She remained vigilant, scanning instruments, checking flaps, rudder, and hydraulics. The danger wasn't over. Sparks from damaged panels flickered. Fuel spilled from the left wing. Every second mattered. "Prepare for evacuation," Avery ordered. "We are alive but not out of danger yet." The clearing's edges loomed, uneven, precarious. Trees threatened to ignite the spilled fuel. The fuselage creaked under its own weight. Every passenger realized the miraculous feat that had just occurred, but the final test of survival remained, getting everyone off the aircraft safely. And above, the F-22s roared, circling like guardians, ready to intervene if the plane faltered again. Avery's call sign, Pixie, had transformed from a nickname into legend mid-flight. The plane had come to a precarious stop in the narrow clearing, its fuselage battered, wheels sunk slightly into the uneven ground. Sparks from damaged panels flickered violently, a faint trail of smoke rising toward the night sky. Fuel seeped dangerously close to the edges, and jagged rocks surrounded the aircraft like a steel trap. Avery Collins remained in the cockpit, eyes scanning the instruments, every sense on high alert. Survival was not over, not yet. Passengers were shaking, white-faced, some crying, some frozen in disbelief. Avery's voice, calm but authoritative, cut through the chaos. "Everyone stay seated until I give instructions. Do not panic. Follow my directions and you will all get out safely." A man from the middle row stumbled forward. "Pixie, how did you do that?" he stammered, his voice trembling. Avery didn't answer. There was no time for congratulations. She was scanning the cockpit, assessing the immediate dangers, leaking fuel, sparks from exposed wiring, and the uneven ground that could shift the plane at any moment. Outside, the roar of the F-22 Raptors echoed in the night. The jets hovered in tight formation, lights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. One of them banked low, dropping a small emergency kit attached to a cable. Avery noted the timing, perfect. The package landed near the nose of the aircraft. She opened it with precision, first aid supplies, communication devices, fire extinguishers. Every piece would be crucial for the next stage, evacuation. Passengers listened carefully. Avery shouted, standing to her full height despite the trembling fuselage. "We have emergency kits. Remain calm. Use the aisle closest to the door. We'll move quickly but methodically. If you follow me, you'll make it out alive." A teenage girl clutched her backpack and whimpered. Avery crouched beside her, lowering her voice. "Listen to me. You're going to be fine. We're going to move together. You can do this." The girl nodded, drawing in a shaky breath. Avery's calm presence radiated, infecting those around her with focus, the same way a commander instills confidence in a battalion before a mission. The co-pilot muttered under his breath, glancing at Avery. "I can't believe this. A 15-year-old saving all of them." Avery didn't respond. Her attention was on the first row. Sparks leapt from exposed wiring above, and a faint hiss of leaking fuel warned that any delay could ignite disaster. She moved down the aisle swiftly, signaling passengers to follow in single file. "Step carefully. Hold hands with the person next to you if you can. Keep low. Move quickly but stay calm." Outside, the F-22 pilots coordinated with emergency crews on the ground, guiding them to the clearing. The roar of the jets was deafening, but Avery didn't flinch. She communicated via the emergency radios, directing ground crews to stabilize the plane and clear a safe exit path. Every second mattered. The first passengers slid carefully down the emergency chutes. Avery guided them. "Left side first. Keep moving. Don't stop." She kept her eyes on the aircraft, watching for sparks, smoke, and shifting metal. A gust of wind swept through the clearing, causing the fuselage to tilt slightly. Avery adjusted instantly, signaling the last passengers to freeze briefly, then continue. A teenage boy stumbled midway down the chute, panic flashing in his eyes. Avery darted to him, grabbing his arm. "Steady. You're okay. Breathe." She guided him down safely. The other passengers followed, inspired by her calm, commanding presence. The pilots in the cockpit watched, awestruck, as Avery coordinated the evacuation. They had fought to regain control of the plane, but she had commanded the real operation now, saving every single passenger. Suddenly, a spark ignited a small fire near the fuselage's rear. Smoke began to curl up into the night sky. Avery didn't hesitate. She grabbed a fire extinguisher from the emergency kit dropped by the Raptors. Kneeling beside the flame, she sprayed carefully, controlling the fire just long enough for the last passengers to slide safely onto the ground. Outside, the clearing was chaos, passengers shivering, some crying, some holding onto loved ones, while jets hovered and emergency vehicles sped closer. Avery coordinated every movement, barking orders to passengers, ensuring no one left behind. She checked each row meticulously. Every passenger accounted for. A soft voice came through the emergency radio. "Pixie, incredible work. Everyone on the ground." "Yes," Avery replied, not a trace of doubt in her voice. "But the aircraft is unstable. Keep your distance until the fire is fully extinguished." Her eyes swept over the clearing. Sparks still flew from damaged wiring. Fuel leaked near jagged rocks. One wrong step, one spark, one gust of wind, and the plane could explode. Avery moved carefully, her calm demeanor masking the adrenaline that surged through her veins. She glanced at the pilots, who were still in shock. "You're done here," she said firmly. "Let the F-22s coordinate with ground crews for stabilization. Your job is complete." The pilots nodded, relief and disbelief etched across their faces. One muttered, "I don't know how to thank you, you just saved everyone." Avery didn't smile. She surveyed the scene, ensuring the last passengers were moved to safety. The F-22 pilots coordinated with emergency crews, directing fire suppression units and medical teams. Avery directed the remaining passengers to a safe distance, counting heads meticulously. One passenger, an elderly man, approached her trembling. How did a kid do this?" he asked, voice quivering. Avery crouched to meet his eyes. "I didn't do it alone," she said softly. "We all did it together. Everyone followed instructions. Everyone survived because they trusted me and I trusted them." Her words were interrupted by a sudden roar. One of the Raptors hovered low, signaling approval. The pilot's words crackled through the radio. "Pixie, you've officially made history." Avery's eyes flicked toward the plane, still smoking, still precariously balanced. "History can wait," she said. "Right now, everyone is safe. That's what matters." A nearby mother pulled her child close, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. Avery nodded, acknowledging the gratitude but keeping her attention on the next critical task, securing the plane and assisting emergency crews. The clearing, once a terrifying expanse of danger, had transformed into a scene of cautious relief. Sparks still flickered, smoke rose into the night, and the mountains loomed around them like silent witnesses. Yet Avery remained calm, moving among the passengers, coordinating with the F-22 pilots and emergency teams. Every action precise, every instruction clear. She finally allowed herself a brief glance at the sky, where the Raptors banked in formation above, silhouettes cutting through the night like guardians. Their presence had been more than symbolic. They had provided guidance, telemetry, and crucial supplies that had made survival possible. Avery's mind acknowledged it silently, filing it away as another calculated factor in the extraordinary night. And as the last passengers were accounted for, Avery allowed herself the smallest exhale. Her pulse was still elevated, her body still tense, but the immediate danger was over. She had guided the plane through impossible odds, coordinated a flawless evacuation, and kept every single life intact. The clearing was quiet now, except for the faint hiss of the remaining smoke and the distant hum of jets. Avery stood among the passengers, surveying the scene. Every face told a story: fear, awe, gratitude, disbelief. One fact was clear: the quiet girl in 7A, known only by her call sign Pixie, had just done what no one thought possible. The clearing was quiet now, save for the hum of emergency vehicles and the distant roar of the F-22s circling overhead. Smoke spiraled from the damaged fuselage, drifting into the night sky. Avery Collins stood at the edge of the clearing, knees stiff from the adrenaline, eyes scanning the passengers she had just guided to safety. Relief mixed with disbelief, awe, and lingering fear painted every face. But even in that calm, Avery knew the night's story had only begun. It would travel far beyond the mountains. Paramedics moved quickly among the passengers, checking for injuries, bandaging scrapes and bruises, and offering comfort. Avery crouched beside a young boy, helping him adjust his seatbelt harness. The child's eyes were wide, trembling. "Are we really safe?" he whispered. Avery offered a small, steady nod. "Yes, you're safe, I promise. Now stay with your family." The mother clutched him tightly, tears streaming down her face. Across the clearing, groups of passengers murmured, pointing toward the dark sky where the F-22s still hovered. One of the jets banked low, signaling approval, a silent salute to the girl who had defied every expectation. Avery felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see the co-pilot, his face still pale but gratitude etched into every line. I don't know what to say," he murmured. You saved everyone. I've flown for 20 years and I've never seen anything like this." Avery shook her head. "You did your part. We did this together. The plane is safe. The passengers are safe. That's what matters." Her voice was steady, but inside, a mix of adrenaline and relief surged like a wave threatening to pull her under. By now, emergency helicopters had arrived, and ground crews worked quickly to stabilize the aircraft. Firefighters sprayed water across smoldering panels, while engineers assessed damage and potential hazards. The clearing, once a terrifying death trap, had become a controlled zone, yet the metallic groans of the plane reminded everyone that the danger had only just been avoided. From the edge of the clearing, a uniformed officer approached Avery. His eyes were sharp, assessing, authoritative. "Cadet Collins," he asked. Avery nodded cautiously. "I'm Colonel Hayes with the Air National Guard. I've been monitoring the situation. Your actions extraordinary. We need a report on the procedure you used immediately." Avery hesitated, looking around at the passengers who had survived purely because of her calculations and decisiveness. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I'll give a full report," she said finally, voice calm but firm. "But right now, everyone needs to be checked. Everyone needs care." The colonel nodded, respect evident in his expression. "Agreed. But understand this, you've just done something historic. People need to know." The first news helicopters appeared, cutting across the dark sky, floodlights scanning the clearing. Cameras whirred and reporters shouted questions over radios, capturing the unfolding drama in real time. Avery felt her stomach tighten. She had survived the impossible, saved lives, and now, suddenly, the world was watching. The first footage aired almost instantly, blurry, chaotic, but unmistakable. A teenager standing amid emergency crews, directing passengers with precision, guiding lives to safety. Social media exploded within minutes. Clips of the girl in 7A circulated on phones, shared in real time. Comments ranged from disbelief to admiration. "How did she do this? Pixie is a national hero. I can't believe a 15-year-old saved a plane." Avery kept moving, focused on the safety of the passengers, her body tense with exhaustion but her mind still calculating every potential hazard. Her attention was pulled to one of the teenagers who had mocked her earlier. He approached hesitantly, eyes wide with a mix of fear and awe. I'm sorry," he whispered. Avery didn't respond immediately. Instead, she gestured toward the medical teams, ensuring he reached safety first. It was the first time she allowed herself to process the complex mix of emotions: fear, triumph, disbelief, and vindication. Colonel Hayes returned, accompanied by a news crew. "Cadet Collins," he said, voice formal but tinged with admiration. "We need to hear the story, precisely what happened in that cockpit, how you coordinated with the pilots, and how you guided everyone to safety. The nation needs to know your call sign." Avery's lips pressed together. Call sign, Pixie. She had earned it in the Air Cadets, a name whispered among mentors, a badge of honor for precision and creativity. Now it would be known worldwide. She swallowed hard. "Pixie," she said finally. "Yes, that's me." The cameras zoomed in, capturing her face, determined, exhausted, and yet unbroken. The world would see the story of the quiet girl, the one who had been laughed at in 7A, now standing as the linchpin of survival for over 150 people. Meanwhile, reporters scrambled to capture statements from survivors. "She saved us," one mother cried, her voice shaking. "I thought we were going to die, and then she just took control." Another passenger echoed the sentiment. "Pixie, I don't even know how to explain it. She was calm, commanding, precise, like she was meant to do this." Avery allowed herself a small exhale. The adrenaline that had kept her focused was beginning to fade, leaving exhaustion, relief, and a new sense of gravity. The magnitude of what had happened was settling in. She had not only survived impossible odds but had become a national hero before even stepping off the cleared ground. Colonel Hayes motioned for the F-22 pilots to descend for recognition. They hovered briefly, salute signals flashing, acknowledging the girl who had performed the impossible. Avery felt a shiver run through her. They were the elite of the elite, and yet here she was, matching them, guiding, calculating, commanding. The media coverage escalated rapidly. Within hours, headlines spread across national outlets. Teen pilot saves plane. 15-year-old Pixie guides crippled airliner to safety. Social media platforms were flooded with clips, memes, and commentary. Viewers debated how a teenager could exhibit such composure and precision under extreme pressure. Yet Avery remained grounded, focused on the survivors. She moved among them, checking for injuries, ensuring they were accounted for, listening quietly to their stories. The fear in their eyes mirrored the fear she had felt moments before, the terror of being at the mercy of physics and fate. But now, there was awe, gratitude, and an undeniable respect. One of the reporters asked the question everyone wanted answered. Pixie, how did you know what to do? How did you save everyone? Avery's eyes met the camera, unwavering. I didn't do it alone. Everyone followed instructions. The pilots, the F-22s, the passengers, we all survived because we worked together. That's all anyone needs to know. Colonel Hayes nodded in agreement. Humility in the face of heroism, he said softly. That's rare. As helicopters lifted off, emergency vehicles departed and the clearing returned to relative calm. Avery finally allowed herself to sit, knees shaking, body exhausted but spirit unbroken. She looked at the pilots, the passengers, the F-22s hovering in the night sky. This moment, chaotic, intense, and historic, was hers, but it belonged to everyone who had trusted her, who had followed her calculations, and who had survived. And far above, the night sky stretched wide, dotted with stars, silent witnesses to a girl whose courage, precision, and calm under pressure had transformed disbelief into survival, laughter into awe, and anonymity into legend. The night air over the clearing was thick with smoke and the distant hum of departing emergency vehicles. Avery Collins stood amidst the survivors, her uniform smudged with soot, hair plastered to her forehead, hands trembling slightly from exhaustion. The adrenaline that had propelled her through the impossible glide and the nerve-wracking evacuation had finally ebbed, leaving a dizzy mix of relief, disbelief, and quiet triumph. Emergency crews were still securing the wrecked aircraft, ensuring no sparks ignited the remaining fuel, while helicopters ferried passengers to hospitals for precautionary checks. Avery's eyes scanned the crowd she had saved, every face a mirror of gratitude, awe, and wonder. Mothers clutched children, siblings embraced each other tightly, and strangers held hands, bound together by the near miss with fate. Colonel Hayes approached once more, a formal but warm expression on his face. "Cadet Collins," he said, voice carrying both authority and reverence, "the President has been briefed. You've performed what many are calling an act of unparalleled courage. Your call sign, Pixie, is going to be immortalized. You saved lives that could never be replaced." Avery's throat tightened. She had been focused on survival, on keeping everyone alive, and on the technical precision that the emergency required. Recognition had never been part of the equation. Yet hearing Hayes speak, seeing the official acknowledgement, stirred a mix of pride and humility. I just did what had to be done," she said softly, her voice steady despite the fatigue. A soft commotion drew her attention. A line of F-22 pilots approached, helmets tucked under arms, faces serious yet smiling faintly. They saluted, a gesture of respect that transcended words. Avery's pulse quickened as she returned the salute. These were some of the most skilled aviators in the world, men and women trained for lethal precision, and yet here they were, honoring a 15-year-old girl. "Cadet Pixie," said one pilot, his voice calm, measured, "you've set a new standard for situational awareness, precision, and courage. We've trained for decades and rarely have we seen anyone, perform under pressure like that. Your name will be in our squadron's history forever." Avery swallowed hard. Pixie. The nickname that had once been a casual call sign in her Air Cadet unit had become legend in a single night. Not just a name, an emblem of courage, precision, and survival. Media crews swarmed, capturing every reaction, every word. Cameras zoomed in on the girl who had commanded adults, controlled a crippled airliner, and coordinated a safe evacuation under impossible conditions. Headlines exploded within hours. Pixie saves 150 lives. Teen aviator becomes national hero. The girl who defied the impossible, from seat 7A to national legend. Social media erupted with awestruck posts, videos, and messages of admiration. Avery remained grounded, moving among the passengers, quietly checking on each one. One mother approached, clutching her baby tightly. Tears streaked her soot-stained cheeks. You saved my family. I can't even," she began, voice breaking. Avery placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now, that's all that matters. You're all safe." The teenage girl from the front row, who had clutched her backpack and whimpering during the landing, hugged Avery tightly. "You're amazing," she whispered. Avery smiled faintly. "You were amazing too. Everyone did what they had to do. We survived together." As the crowd slowly began to disperse, Avery noticed the co-pilot lingering, eyes wide with a mix of awe and respect. I've flown hundreds of flights, emergencies included," he said. "But I've never seen anything like what you just did. You saved us all, Pixie, every single one of us." Avery nodded, emotions rising briefly. "I just followed the plan, the telemetry, and the data. I focused on the glide and the landing. That's all I could do." Her voice, calm yet firm, belied the depth of exhaustion running through her body. Colonel Hayes returned, this time flanked by military photographers. "Cadet Collins," he said, "we'd like to officially recognize your actions with a commendation from the Air National Guard. Your call sign will be officially recorded in squadron history. Pixie, your courage, precision, and calm under pressure have saved lives and inspired the nation." Avery felt her pulse skip. Recognition was never her goal, but hearing the word commendation resonated deep inside. Pixie, the girl who had been laughed at in 7A, was now officially legendary. The F-22 pilot stepped forward, one handing her a small patch. "For courage, skill, and composure beyond your years," he said. Avery carefully accepted it, fingers trembling slightly. The emblem glinted in the faint light, a symbol of what she had accomplished. Meanwhile, the passengers began sharing their stories, recording messages for news outlets, posting images and videos on social media. Everyone wanted to capture the moment, to immortalize the girl who had changed the course of a night that could have ended in tragedy. Avery's eyes fell on a group of teenagers who had mocked her before the crisis. Now they looked at her with awe and respect. One of them muttered quietly, "She's unbelievable." Avery simply nodded, offering no need for words. Actions had already spoken louder than anything could. The clearing, once a battlefield of terror, was now a stage for heroism. Emergency crews secured the plane fully, firefighters ensured the smoldering panels were extinguished, and helicopters prepared to lift passengers to safety. Avery remained among them, the quiet center of calm, watching as order slowly returned. As dawn began to break, casting golden light over the mountains and the clearing, Avery finally allowed herself a moment to breathe. She stood, back straight, eyes scanning the horizon. The night's chaos had passed. Every passenger was alive, every life saved. Every calculation, every decision, every second of courage had mattered. News helicopters hovered above one last time, capturing the clearing from the air, showing a girl standing amid a crowd of survivors, emergency crews, and hovering jets, a figure of calm authority, precision, and bravery. Pixie. The nation, slowly waking to the magnitude of the night's events, would never forget. Social media was flooded with tributes, news outlets ran feature stories, and military officials began to prepare for a national commendation. Avery's story was not just about surviving a catastrophic emergency. It was about courage, intelligence, leadership, and the extraordinary capacity of one young person to defy expectation. As Avery finally turned away from the crowd, walking toward the waiting vehicle that would take her home, she allowed herself a faint smile. She thought of the pilots, the passengers, the F-22s, and the meticulous calculations that had made the impossible possible. Pixie had survived, yes, but more than survival, she had left an indelible mark on everyone who had witnessed the impossible. And far above, the sun rose over the mountains, casting light on a girl whose courage had saved lives, transformed disbelief into awe, and ensured that the call sign Pixie would be remembered forever.